Hi everyone, it's me, Warwick Wright again, your annoyingly altruistic commie. Um, I just want to follow up on a few things that I've been saying before. As you know, I made a post kind of recently about being able to discipline oneself to split one's kind of ideology from symbolism of the ideology and make sure you focus on ideology itself. Um, I kind of realised that perhaps I should have explained a few things a bit more clearly about discernment and its place in the world in the here and now. Um, I think it's very important. One of the important things, though correct beliefs is very important aspect to making the world a better place. I think also what I didn't mention is that awareness is also very important. So I was touching on how discernment is sharpened by a person being able to split their ideology from symbols of the ideology and their own identity, but at the same time being able to not associate different ideology with another person's identity, because it can make people have a bit of anger and animosity towards each other. There's lots of groups in the world that perhaps may not have the best opinions of each other. You got like the capitalists and the communists, not too fond of each other. There's normally a bit of bad blood between Jews and Muslims, especially Zionists, we find. But what this post is really about is being able to discipline yourself to speak to a person and ignore whatever ideology they're from or what they identify themselves with, and speak to the individual themselves. This is also posted a bit about propaganda, and I find with propaganda, the basis of propaganda is really all about feeding person only one side of the story, one point of view. And obviously this is on a political level, but it's on a personal level as well. People like that have, say, a bit of a criminal nature. They like to hide a side of the story, a point of view as well, or it could be just a little family feud. And propaganda is a lot more common than people think, because it's not just on a political level; it's on a personal level as well. I lived in the States in my late childhood, from the age of 11 to about 16. And I remember when I was in America as a child, we had to say a Pledge of Allegiance like every day before school, like when we started school. I still remember the words. I've got it written down here on my little web browser. And these are the words to it. This is the words I had to say at school at the beginning of every day. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And I said this for about 5 years, every day at school before we actually started school. I don't think it's law now. I don't think people in the United States have to say that anymore at the beginning of school. But this is this kind of saying, this thing they used to say in my later years. Now I kind of class this as kind of a premises for propaganda. In the United States, I was brainwashed to believe that communists are bad, and the rhetoric was, we're good and everyone else is bad, and this is kind of propaganda. You only ever got one side of the story. To my knowledge, I think the United States is still doing that, but they do it in England, here in England as well. Everywhere you go, they're always trying to hide one side of the story. And I'm trying to reach out to people here and ask you all to, use your intellect, your common sense, read between the lines, and try to get a grip on what they're not telling you. And also, if you're a member of a group like I am, obviously I call myself a communist. But if I speak to an American person that seems a bit fascist or a bit capitalist, I use my intellect and I use my discipline to not associate a political group with the individuals of that political group. I blank out my own identity, my own pride in being a communist. I blank out what I might think about the American government, and I'll speak to an American individual as an individual. And what I noticed is that with all this propaganda and one side of the story, is that if you can blank out these things with identity, personal identity, you realize that when I speak to an American, they're not bad people. They're actually good people. When they say that Pledge of Allegiance, they generally mean it. And you hear these war cries on television. I play computer games sometimes, like World War II games, and you hear shooting these communists on the games. They're saying, shoot the communists, get on. You hear and if you're playing on the Russian side, you say, kill the capitalist pigs, in a Russian accent. And if you watch the news, you might hear someone shout out, say, Allahu Akbar, and kill some Western soldier. But what this is all about is understanding that the whole idea of propaganda and brainwashing is that, when people join the army and they fight on the front lines, is that, if you recognise a particular group as, say, corrupt or terrorist group, and, I'm not going to say which groups I class as terrorist or corrupt, because that's not the subject of this post, but whatever group you might see as a terrorist organisation or corrupt, it's very important to understand that the individual, the frontline grunts, aren't actually bad people. A person doesn't put their own personal life and the line at risk for evil purposes. When a person joins the army, they genuinely believe that the people they're fighting are evil. And the truth is, if I recognise someone as a terrorist organisation, and I meet someone that identifies with this organisation, I won't actually see the individual as a terrorist. I might see the organisation politically as a terrorist organisation, or a corrupt organisation. But I know that when a person puts their personal life on the line, in the front line, they're not evil people. And when the Americans join the army and they kill some Taliban, they kill a Taliban thinking that they're evil, and they're not. The Taliban kills the American soldier thinking they're evil, and they're not. The truth is, propaganda is all about brainwashing, one side of the story, and the idea of propaganda is to trick good people into killing each other for the benefit of bad people. And this is really the subject of the post. And what I'm saying to people is everyone needs to let go of their identity, and not let go of the ideology. Hold on to the ideology. But whatever identity their ideology is associated with, whatever identity or people in authority that might be embodied or associated with this ideology, you've got to blank that out, and you've got to look at the individual. And I speak to an American capitalist, and if you really listen to them and blank out the group that they belong to, you realise the vast majority of people aren't bad people. And this is really, really important. There's lots of bad things going on in the world at the moment, and there's lots of identity politics going around. And I think the best way to sharpen your discernment is, again, like I was saying in my previous post, you need to purify your belief. So no one belief contradicts another belief. You need to let go of your identity, everything that you are, to be truly a good person. And I think, if you develop this discernment, you maybe start saying to yourself, I think this is the way forward. This is the way to make a peaceful world, is for people to be able to split that association between their identity and their ideology, and learn to speak to the individual, and with this attitude, this is the type of attitude which brings people to the negotiating table before they actually go to war. Every time there's hope for a new world, or peace happens, or looks like peace is going to happen, some corrupt government or organisation starts trouble again. And the starting of trouble, it's always the same. It's identity politics. It's looking at people's beliefs and their aspirations and learning to twist things. I've just learned, I know I'm kind of repeating myself a bit from the last post, but I want to emphasise what I was talking about in the last post, about the importance of awareness, and because for the world to become a better place, ever since the end of the Neolithic Age, is it Neolithic Age? I think it's called the Neolithic Age, the time when we stopped being hunter-gatherers, and started, because when this happened, this is when we became interdependent on each other. Mankind is an interdependent species now, since the end of the Neolithic Age, since we stopped becoming hunter-gatherers. And this means that no human being is truly independent. And as I said before, dependence is a prerequisite to control. So the reason why awareness is important to build a better world is because we have to know who to trust, who to depend on, And if we depend on the wrong people and they abuse that dependence, that causes a lot of trouble. So this is why I want to emphasize the importance of discernment. If you have pure beliefs and no one belief contradicts another belief, and this actually increases your discernment, your awareness, your judge of character, and knowing who to trust and who not to trust. If you can let go of your identity or your identity which is associated with your ideology, and look at the ideology itself, and discipline yourself not to associate other people with their group, and speak to the individual, then again, this will improve your discernment and awareness even more. You'll be able to speak to an individual. Because when an individual is bad, a bad person will always try to distract you away from good and positive beliefs. And, and if you have the same type of discernment I've developed through pure beliefs and lack of identity, you'll be able to tell if a person's bad or not. Sometimes a person might distract you from a good belief, not because they're a bad person, but because they've been indoctrinated by a bad person. And I speak to a person, I can tell they're a bad person, and when they try to distract me from a correct belief, they'll start quoting psychology, talking about the hippocampus part of the brain, quoting history, using every last piece of their intellectual energy to do anything they can to distract you from that correct belief without attacking the belief itself. And after a while, you realise it's of personal importance to them that you be distracted from this belief. And that's when you can tell that's a bad person you're speaking to, not someone that's been indoctrinated by a bad person. And now, use an example with the American elections. You've got the Clinton supporters and the Trump supporters that hate each other, because, and if you can let go, if the Clinton supporters can let go of what they associate with Trump and speak to Trump supporters themselves, and the same on the other side, you'll see that Trump supporters aren't bad people and the Clinton supporters aren't bad people. Their hearts are in the right place. And I know this is going to sound a bit controversial, what I'm about to say, but I want to make it very, very clear. I do not sympathise with suicide bombers at all. But I know it sounds silly, but suicide bombers, their hearts are actually in the right place. I know it sounds silly, but they're willing to give their life for something they genuinely believe is the right thing. I think they're wrong. I think they've been brainwashed. But I know it sounds strange. They're not actually evil people. I know it sounds strange, but they're actually not. And this is what people can't see, because when you propaganda, when these news reports go out and they film things on the battlefield, they find the very worst examples of the enemy that they could possibly find, and that's the only thing you see on television. You won't see anything else, and it's kind of very important to understand this, that everyone needs to understand they're not getting the full side of the story. They're not getting the full point. They're not getting both points of view, and I think a very good empowering philosophy to believe when it comes to evil is you mustn't be naive. Anything which is possible, conceivable, or viable, evil people are guilty of, no matter how bizarre or far-fetched it is. And I've seen a lot of things in life that I can talk about. And I know that brainwashing regimes go on in Western prisons. They literally violate a person's mind on a subliminal level. I know everything that goes on. You'd be surprised what I've actually seen and what I know. And people are very naive to it. And one of the reasons why these things go on is because people don't believe they go on. The reason why below the law criminals exist is because people don't believe that below the law criminals exist. And this is the bizarre thing. So we need to stop being naive. And believe me, it's a very, very, very good philosophy to believe that you should never underestimate evil, what they get up to. Yeah, and it's a very, very, very wise belief to believe that anything, literally anything, conceivable, viable, or doable, if it's possible, if it's the type of mischief this is possible, then they will get up to it. And it's always guaranteed. And in corrupt governments, a lot of people think the higher up you are, the more you can be trusted, but it's actually the other way around. But anyway, I'm gonna close with that. I hope I've given you guys a lot to think about, because you need awareness. You need to have discernment. Discernment is so important to build a better world, because we're an interdependent species. We depend on each other and trust each other, and it's key to knowing who to trust. If you trust the wrong person, then it'll lead to a very, very bad world. Thanks for listening to you guys again, and hopefully when I start making some more poems, I'll upload those as well. Thank you for your time, and God bless.